Well, as we come to the end of this week's devotionals, I want to look at verse 7 because I think it really kind of encapsulates a lot of what we've been talking about through the week. One of the things that Paul says here in verse 7 is that these people that are all caught up in these deceptions, these doctrines and so forth, and lifestyle sins, says they're always learning but never able to acknowledge the truth. And it's not like we come to a place in our Christian life where we can no longer be taught anything, we know everything, we understand everything. But really, it's, as the Amplified renders it, says they're forever inquiring, forever getting information, but never able to arrive at a recognition and a knowledge of the truth. I had a friend of mine, when he first got saved, we were talking, and he told me, he said, the hardest thing for me to give up when I got saved was the search for the truth. And he says, I defined my life as being a searcher for truth, and when I found the truth, it meant I had to give up the search. And in other words, as long as you're searching, you don't have to come to any kind of final definition. You don't really have to make any kind of final commitment. You don't really have to do anything in particular because you're still searching. It's kind of like if I go looking for a new car and I'm going from car lot to car lot or website to website. As long as I'm searching, I can look at everything and anything and really kind of take my time. But when I finally find the one that is the right one for me, then if I don't commit to it, I will never enjoy the pleasure of driving it. And I think that's the way a lot of people are. They like the idea of being agnostic. I always get a kick out of people saying, I'm agnostic, not realizing that the Latin version of the word agnostic translation is ignoramus. In other words, we claim agnosticism about something for which we have no ability we can rightly say we don't know. That's why the psalmist twice says in two different psalms, he says, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. To be agnostic about God, saying I don't know if there is a God, is really a lie that we tell to ourselves just so that we don't have to really kind of acknowledge that he's really there. Because if we acknowledge he's there, that has profound implications. If he is really there, and then suddenly I am here because of him. So what is my responsibility to him? What does he want from me? Does he want anything from me? And the point is, when you begin to read the Bible, you find that God wants a lot from us. So these people will spend all their life kind of going from thing to thing. They're the people who jump from church to church. They'll jump from religion to religion. They'll chase one ideology after another. They're just moving around all the time because they don't want to have to actually come to a conclusion. And anytime they're a part of a group where a conclusion is required, if you're going to continue to be part of the group, they're going to move on to another thing. They'll just slip away and show up someplace else doing something else. And I think it's really, really sad because I've known people, for example, who've decided that they're women trapped in a man's body, and they go through all of that transitioning stuff and they get to the other end. And one day they suddenly realize that wasn't who I was. I guess my analogy breaks down because they obviously made a commitment. But that's the whole point, is that you realize that if you commit to something that's not true, it becomes obvious right away that it's not true. So a lot of these guys would simply secretly dress up like women, but in every other context they were men, because they didn't really want to go all the way, because in their heart and their mind they knew that this was a mistake, this was a failure. And I think that's what we have to understand, is that there are so many people like that who will hide on the edges. They'll be in the periphery. They'll never be all out for something. In fact, something like 65% of the population will never really outwardly commit to anything of a major nature. They can be very patriotic when they're in a crowd of patriotic people, and they can be very unpatriotic when they're a crowd of unpatriotic people. They'll march with BLM, and then they'll march with the Proud Boys, because that's where they're at the moment. They take their cues from whatever environment they're in, and that's why they become so gullible, so susceptible, so abusable. And that's why it's really important that you don't let yourself be like that you are very clear that who you are in every context of your life is who you are in every context of your life. I remember my oldest son telling me one time when he was going through high school, And he said, I would have people in the church come up to me and say, well, what's your dad like when he's at home? I mean, what is he like when he's not at church? And for him, he said it was a very puzzling question, because he said, I would just say, well, he's dad at church and he's dad at home. I mean, it's like, I don't come to church and he's pastor. He's dad. He's the same person all the time. And for some people, that was kind of unthinkable, because they were so used to people playing roles. And I'm afraid that I've met many people who, man, they are charming and engaging and friendly and happy and just really wonderful people. They love bomb you like crazy. And then you find out in other contexts, they're ruthless, they're selfish, they're predatorial. And you just realize that they are different people in different places. They adjust themselves like chameleons to the context they're in. They'll be whatever they need to be until they feel threatened, and then the true them comes out in all of its viciousness. But I think what we find is that today we live in this kind of a always learning dynamic because of the digital age that we're in. There's probably no better way to describe the digital cultures as being ever learning, yet nothing that matters is learned. Nothing that will make a difference is learned. We can present ourselves on Facebook as being younger and more attractive than we actually are. I mean, I know I'm going to shock you, but this video has not been doctored up. Some of you may say you probably should think about that, but the reality is, this is what you get. I am what I am, and I just am kind of staggered when I see people's Facebook posts that I know, and I look at the picture and go, "That isn't you. I don't even recognize who you are, because you have been cleaned up." And that's one of the things, is not only do people present themselves differently than they are, but also on the negative side, we can now use digital technology to put words into the mouth of people that they never said, to engage them or place them in places and activities that they were never in, as a way of just subverting them. So it's such a crazy time to live. But ultimately, what really is the fundamental issue here with these people? They're never an admission or an ownership of the fact that they are sinners. And what we need to understand in terms of our own life and other people's lives is that we can't change anything about ourselves until we admit that sin has warped that part of our personality. It's a lifelong enterprise, by the way, that even at 73, almost 74 years of age, I mean, I am almost daily coming to realize how that my childhood shaped and molded me and affected me. And it kind of becomes clear when your family members get aged and that their filters begin to go away and they become kind of more like who they are. And you realize that these are the people who impressed themselves upon you. They kind of left their fingerprint in the clay of your life before you even had a chance to even think about what was going on. And it may be affecting you even into your present time. So what do you do when you see that? Well, you simply say, Father, I realize that that's sin, and I ask you to forgive me. I ask you to forgive me, and I ask you to change me. It's really the only thing that you can do, because God is the change agent, not you. You can think and work and try and listen, but even if you're going through counseling with some kind of a therapist, and the therapist points out something that you should really consider, the answer to that is saying, I really need to pray about that. I really need to pray and ask God, is this something that I need to address in my life? Because one of the things I tell parents, Christian parents especially, I said, you have to realize that you can't raise sinlessly perfect kids. You're a sinner, they live in a sinful world, and they're sinners. What are the chances of them being sinless perfect? The answer is 0. So we have to come to grips with that. That has to become a piece. We need to acknowledge that truth in our life, that we are basically vulnerable to sin. We're vulnerable to temptation. That's why Jesus said we should pray, Lord, deliver me from temptation and keep the evil one from me. And don't let the enemy get a foothold into my life. These are the things that I pray on a daily basis, not just by rote, but by focus and concentration, that I know that that's a true, real possibility with me. And so I say, God, help me not to fall into the traps that the enemy is trying to lay for me. And if you pray those prayers, you're not going to be perfect. You're going to still find yourself messing up, but you'll catch yourself messing up much earlier in the process than if you simply think you don't have to worry about something, and then you'll get overwhelmed by it. My pastor used to have one warning he gave to us. He said, you'll never fall in the area where you know that you're weak. You'll always fall in the area where you think you're strong. So when you start saying things like, I don't know how they could do that, or I would never do that, then realize you're not being very objectively honest with yourself, because they said the same thing. And that's the area where Satan gets you, because you see, he uses our pride and our self-confidence to catch us off guard. So as you go into this weekend, be on your guard. Blessing.